Hi, so I want to make a video today about the ego and the spiritual blockages that you can encounter by being in this space. Although the ego is a very awesome aspect of our being, I love that we have an ego because of the fact that we have an individual way of expressing ourselves, and we have a way of using our bodies to get things, in a sense. Like, we use our, like, what we desire to get the things that will bring us comfort and happiness, and in any way you can do that, your ego will go and do that. And so that's why I find the ego very valuable in our being. But the problem is that people tend to go, they tend to go too into their ego, or they'll go to extreme extents to get the things that they want by using the ego. And they're not understanding that you're supposed to transcend the ego. You're not supposed to live the rest of your days in your ego. You're actually supposed to reach a higher space. And if you watched any of my other videos, you would know that the next step above, or not even above the ego, it's just the next step towards transcending yourself, would be to start using the heart space, which is the heart chakra, which is an emotional aspect of you. But so many of us are afraid to get to the next level, or to transcend in that way, because there's a vulnerable aspect of us that we'd rather just subconsciously tuck away, and we'd rather ignore it because the ego protects us, in a sense. But when you have to use your heart, you can, it gets back to the core of who you are, and it makes you vulnerable and open to being hurt. And so this is why people don't tend to transcend. So I'm going to be using like the same kind of model I was using in my last videos, and I'm gonna put the link to those videos in the description. But I pretty much went over all the minds. I gave them names because your chakras are these mind states, and these mind states, I haven't been able to find names for them. All we have for the chakras are the heart, the sacral, the solar plexus, and the third eye chakra. Like, we only have those as names, which is fine. It's just that people will then forget that these are minds, and when you use your mentality, you're using these minds. And because of how hijacked a lot of the spiritual terms have been over like the last years, since everything's been pretty much hijacked, it's really hard to communicate this stuff in a way where people can take it seriously, or people can see it without it being all fantastical, you know? So I want to get back into, I guess, the basics. And if you want to listen to how I explain those minds, I'll put the link to those videos in the description. But we're going to talk about the ego mind in this video, and how it works with the other lower minds. I call them lower minds, not that they are like less, it's hard to explain because we need these parts of us. But what happens is that people tend to stay trapped in this way of thinking, and they don't pass anything mentally past the 3D. So the 3D aspects of life is all that they're consumed by, and they're not able to see the fourth dimensional way of thinking or just going about life. And a lot of people don't even know what 4D is. And then when we start talking about 5D, people are, how could they know if they don't know 4D? If they haven't even mastered 4D, how can they get past it? So what I'm trying to do is explain all this stuff, so then an average person can understand why it's important for us to stop doing the same thing, because we are trapping ourselves and doing more harm than good by staying in this certain mind frame, and only tuning into a certain aspect of our mentality that's only meant to serve very little functions. We're very complex. We have so much more to offer than to just stay in the 3D and to only be fixated on 3D aspects of life. These things are temporary. And so when it comes to the ego mind, even though the ego mind knows that things are temporary, it does whatever it can to preserve itself. So it'll try to find things that bring it comfort. It'll try to find that stability somehow, because it knows that if it can sustain itself, then it can somehow be happy within that. And so think of it this way. And I'm going to be using the same model, so if you haven't seen this already, I got this off of Google, but I put my own descriptions right here, and then it's associated with the bodies. So for the first 4 chakras, for instance, you have the root, you have the sacral, you have the solar plexus, and then you have the heart. So we tend to stay below the heart space, normally, unless you're an above average person. And the reason for that is because the first 3 chakras support what you're consciously aware of, your self-esteem and how you feel about the things that you're consciously aware of, or the things that you're consciously interacting with, and then how you find comfort within those things, or how you build a way to sustain yourself with these things, with just the things that you're consciously aware of. And when it comes to the 4th chakra, which is the heart chakra, we tend to not really use that space, because when things bring us comfort and happiness, why open our hearts, right? Why understand why we have certain triggers in the first place, or why things trigger things to begin with? Like, why bring all that up when we can just, push that aside and just live a comfortable, lavish, or at least your ego will try to make your life as lavish as comfortable. But if it doesn't manage to make a lavish life for you, or if you're not able to make a life for yourself that brings you that happiness, you'll be kind of triggered. And instead of going into the heart space to find that out, what your ego does is start looking at its reflection. And I call this the inner child. The inner child is that reflection of the ego. It's that soft spot. So imagine when you look in the mirror, and when you look in the mirror, you're not thinking like, oh, I love you. Like, look at all the things that you went through to get, maybe. It depends on how you've evolved as a person. But you're usually not thinking, oh, I accept myself for who I am, and then I'm going to use what I am right now to be vulnerable and open, and I'm going to start resonating from my heart space and align myself. Like, unless you're evolved, you're not doing that. And when the ego mind is looking in the mirror or looking at that reflection, it's thinking, what can I fix so I can accept myself? Or what can I fix to make myself feel better? What can I do to make things more comfortable for me? Even if it has to go to extreme lengths to do that, even if it's superficial, or even if it's artificial, even if it's just, if it's not even natural, it'll find a way to make it work for itself, because it thinks that it has to fix its reflection to bring that happiness, to bring that, to heal that wounded aspect of itself. It starts looking outside instead of tracing back to the self. And to actually heal that aspect of you, you would have to go back to the heart space. So I'm going to use the same example I did in my last video. Like, when you are in your ego self, right? And you are, I guess, working to make money, it'll look at the wounded aspect of itself, the ego will, and look at that inner child. And it'll think like, well, when I was back in the day, or whenever you were younger, back in the day, I didn't have enough money to sustain myself, and I was poor, or I felt like I was in lack. So now I have to go to these extreme lengths to not be in that position anymore. And this is like a logical reason, and it makes sense, right, as to why that would be a fix for its situation, you know. But when it really what it really boils down to is the mentality. The mentality believes that it has to do that because of the lack mentality, because it feels like it's in lack. And that part would be the answer hidden in the subconscious mind, which is the heart space. But the ego doesn't really like being there because it's an unknown space. Like, you want to be in the space that brings you the most warmth, the most comfort, and that makes the most sense. And that's the ego's realm. It focuses on things that make sense. And even if it's a reflection, that reflection makes sense because it's a aspect of it. So the ego won't even touch the heart space sometimes. It takes you going back into yourself to realize, oh, I need to develop an abundance mindset, which will require me to open my heart, or to work on my heart space, or to be more vulnerable and honest with myself. And this will scare a person who's spent a lot of time in their ego. The ego will help you get things out of life, because when you're out in the world and you're around other people who are maneuvering through their egos, everyone's kind of, you can say everyone's wearing a mask. Like, everyone has to hide that wounded aspect of themselves, and on top of that, we're just too afraid to even be vulnerable because we don't know what's out there. We don't know who's going to hurt us. Like, it's so unknown to connect with strangers. It's so unknown to trust people or to have an open heart. Not saying that you have to trust people, because it's good to have discernment. Like, this is why the ego is good for us. It gives us that logical discernment as to what makes sense and what could work in the 3D. But when we're just going through life closed off, blocked off, hearts closed, it makes it very hard to find real connection. And although the ego is really good at being warm, and it's really good at finding ways to bring comfort to other people, because it provides that safe space for everyone. It wants to make sure that it's safe and everyone around it and its space is safe. But it's so it's superficial. It's like surface level, and it doesn't require any depth. If you really wanted to know if you were safe around people, or if you really wanted to know about your environment, you would, one, just be honest with yourself. If you are kind of skeptical about your environment or people, or you're distrusting, being able to admit that, instead of the ego likes to play it off as like, oh, there's nothing to worry about, like, because it doesn't even want to think about it. But it'll still act as if there's something to worry about. So that's what's kind of contradictory about the ego. Like, it will try to strive for that result, but it doesn't get it because of its lack of connection. It's a mental aspect, and it's like the first mental aspect of you. It's like more immediate. It's like your immediate logical mental self. So when it comes to the ego and the inner child, I want to get more into that, because this dynamic is very interesting. It's one of those dynamics that's like, if you're stuck in that, you have to somehow recognize it. You have to somehow pull yourself out of it in order to see that there's another way to go about life. With the inner child, or the soft spot of the ego, the reflection, the ego sometimes doesn't know that that's a reflection. Like, it knows that it's like a soft spot, but it thinks that is its self-esteem, when that isn't its self-esteem. It's just looking at a reflection of what it wants to work on. Like, the ego's all about working on stuff. It's all about improving and somehow finding a way to gain that comfort. It's looking for a way to, I guess, shine. It wants you to be the shiniest object in the room, almost. Like, it wants to stand out because it has its own individuality, and it wants to be able to bring happiness. It wants other people to be happy around it, or it wants to somehow feel comfortable in its space. Even if it's alone, it'll be alone if it has to be, just to have that comfort. However, that's when things become a little rocky, because now this ego side thinks that in order to have comfort, it has to limit itself to a certain interaction, or it has to limit itself somehow and stay confined within a certain space to be comfortable, instead of just being transparent, open. It hasn't, the self, if it hasn't evolved past the fourth heart chakra, then it doesn't even know what's on the other side. It doesn't know that it'll transcend. It just knows that it's warm in here currently, so I'm gonna stay on this side. It's comfortable right here, so I'm gonna stay over here. I'm gonna stay with what I know. I'm gonna stay what makes sense to me logically. And this is when we can get like mental blockages, because you're not expanding. You're not allowing yourself to see the other side. And you can only do that when you've broken past that uncomfortable aspect of yourself, which is gonna be the subconscious mind, which is walking through the unknown. And if we are afraid to walk through the unknown and you don't see the other side, then you don't actually open up the other chakras. Not that they're not already open. They're already open. It's just that you're not using that space or those spaces. All of these chakras are just spaces where your mentality can function to work. So the more space that you expand, or the more space that you make for your mentality to work, the more it has to work with. Like the more space you give yourself to see a broader perspective, or to make connections, or to you open yourself up to see other points of views, and you can really be at that observational standpoint when it comes to life and the collective and societies. You can see things from a higher perspective, and that's where we all want to be. But the problem is that the ego is so scared that it'll even want to just have the illusion of it without actually having that, because it's afraid of the steps it must take to have that. To have the illusion of that means it's comfortable and it's within the realm of what it knows, and it doesn't have to do things that are unknown to it, or it doesn't have to open up. It doesn't have to be transparent. It doesn't have to be vulnerable. It can just stay within what it knows, and it can be comfortable and happy within that. And whatever spotlight it is broadcasted because of that is what it wants everyone to see. And what it doesn't want people to see is all that unknown stuff, which is something that we have to work on, because we have the space for it, we have the capacity. But within the way we structure ourselves from even just like an early age of like social conditioning, we're just afraid. And fear is just a frequency that disrupts the mental space, and it's a fear and all that low vibrational stuff. It's just a vibration that can only disrupt the lower vibrational dimensions of you, because once you go beyond that heart chakra, you realize that there is not really a such thing as fear. But I mean, fear exists. It's just that when you jump over that frequency, you start to realize that, like, I was afraid of that, like and it doesn't make sense to you anymore to limit yourself to that. It doesn't make sense anymore, because you're looking down at it now. Not really that there's like an up and down, but it's just that it's not able to affect you in the same way. But if you're actually in those lower dimensions, then you're right there where it vibrates. Because when you have like higher vibrational aspects of you, or higher vibrations just like flowing through your space, then it usually has like a certain frequency, and we call that a high vibration because you kind of catch on to the waves of it faster. Being in a certain frequency, you can catch on to the waves, to the wavelengths, I guess you can call it. But if you're on a lower vibration, then you can feel the vibration, like the vibrato. It's like when you feel a motor, and it's like, or like this, like let's say like this. I have a better example. Have you ever been in an earthquake? Like, I'm in California, so we have earthquakes. I've been in an earthquake that I didn't feel because I was too high vibe and doing stuff and focused on other things, right? But then there are times where I'm like sleeping, where I'm in a really relaxed state, or maybe not even just from being relaxed, just I'm just at a vibration where I can pick up on that vibration. And the fact that I'm at a vibration already where I can pick up on subtle vibrations like that makes it so then I become disrupted. I become energetically disrupted because I can pick up on it. Otherwise, if I was like awake and doing stuff and busy, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. So it's like that. Energetically, you pick up on vibrations based on where you're already at. And if you're already at a certain vibration, chances are you're going to pick up on those vibrations. Anyways, so when it comes to the ego mind and the inner child, the ego mind picks up on those vibrations and it looks at the inner child as a reflection, because it's like when let's say you look good one day, right? And you're just so into it and you want to look at every reflection that you pass. The ego is constantly doing this. The ego is always like, I wonder what I look like when I was doing this. I wonder what this came off as. I wonder what I look like while doing this. I wonder how these people see me. I wonder how this person sees me, and I wonder if this person sees me how I want them to see me. And it's all about being seen. And so the ego is definitely seeing that reflection, that wounded aspect or that soft spot, and it knows it's there, and it's constantly trying to protect it. It's like, I want them to see me this way because I don't need them to see that. And it's what happens is that our souls doesn't understand that is a reflection. You can't fulfill that. That can't be fulfilled. The only thing you can do is work on the self as a whole and to fulfill the next space, which would be the heart space. Because once you fulfill that can be fulfilled. That reflection can't be fulfilled. Like if you try to feed your reflection can't eat, okay? But you can feed yourself and you will feel full, you will feel fulfilled. So our mentality, although it's like we know this, but we still don't know this. Like energetically, like we're not understanding how energy works, and we're not understanding energy within ourselves enough to understand that we can't do anything about those past aspects now. We can't do anything about the reflection, no matter how beaten and battered it looks. The only thing you can do is trace back to yourself, like stop looking at the reflection, trace back to yourself, and kind of go within, like, okay, back to myself, like maybe I only feel this way because I'm in lack. Like I feel lack. I feel like I don't have something. Instead of looking at the reflection and externally trying to externalize your lack, so then it feels less of your responsibility. It's more scary for the self to have to take responsibility for the fact that it's in lack, It'd rather just see something and try to fix it, like ego-wise. It would rather just go do something, like pay for someone to fix it, pay for a new medicine or something, instead of just shifting away from that reflection and just sitting with yourself and asking, why is my mind at this space? Why is it in this place? Instead of me feeling fulfilled, why isn't it? And you can use that reflection to trace back. Like that reflection is a tool, but you're not supposed to become attached to the tools. You're supposed to become attached to yourself. Like you're not supposed to become attached to outside things. And that's a representation of being attached to an outside thing, an outside non-physical thing. You can't do anything about a reflection. So if you're going to work on anything, it should be that heart space. And vulnerability, transparency, that's one of the hardest things to work on that a lot of people tend to avoid. But when they do work on it, they feel 10 times better. They feel like they can take on anything. Like fear no longer exists because they realize that that hurdle was an energetic blockage. And this is how I like to look at it. The heart space is an emotional aspect of you. It's also like, it's like where your astral body likes to, when you go into your dreams, and you're in your astral body mostly because you're dreaming and you're not using your physical body. And it's like it picks up on the things that you're consciously aware of in the subconscious. So you become consciously aware of the subconscious at that moment when you're dreaming, and what you're subconsciously attached to. It's shining a light on what you are subconsciously attached to when you're dreaming. So it depends on what you dream about or what you surround yourself with. Is what's going to be in your dreams. And since it's your astral body, that's a good representation of like the subconscious self of you. Like it's a good representation because it's like you don't know you're in a dream. You don't know you're in a dream until someone in the dream tells you you're in a dream, or something within you tells you that you're dreaming. Even then you'll forget because everything starts to feel so real. And so when it comes to your heart space, this is why your subconscious is like your heart space, because it's like that attachment, those emotional attachments, the things that you attach to because of your emotions. And it's like it's an emotional aspect for that reason. And when you're able to kind of dive into the unknown, and you become less afraid of the unknown, and you're able to just be in that heart space where you're transparent with people, you're not hiding anything, you're honest about how you feel, and you're not going to sink into like a lower nature, like, oh well, I mean, I'm not really feeling like that, it's okay. Like, you know, when you're not going through something and it's not okay, but you are trying to cover it up, like it is okay, like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, that's you falling back into the ego because it's trying to go back into that comfort zone. But when you just like, you know what, it's not okay, you all of a sudden have to take responsibility. And that's that threshold, that's a hurdle. And it's like an energetic dam. That's why we say dam, because when you aren't able to get past that threshold and things aren't flowing, when things seem like your emotions can't flow because you have that ego that you're afraid to pass that separation between your ego and your heart. You know, you built a dam and that energy can't flow. That's why you say dam. So when you do, this makes that connection between your heart and your mind a lot easier, because then you're able to verbalize those things on your heart, and you don't even have to verbalize it sometimes if you just like express it somehow, some way, if you stop hiding it and pretending like it's not there, just some kind of expression of it helps your throat chakra. It helps open that up. It creates this is when manifestation happens, because now you're working with vibration to pull things to your heart. It's like, now that this is kind of running properly, now when you use your vibration, things will start to fall in alignment, because it's drawing in things that resonate with that space. It's like a little pathway. And when you're able to do that, now you can see how things are manifesting into your existence. Not even just manifesting, but you're able to see why you constructed things that way, or why you thought that made sense and how it doesn't make sense now. Like, you're able to use that third eye, which is not really a third eye because it was there first, but you're able to use that space, and that's why we call it the head space. But really, that's like an emotional aspect of you. Your throat, or your throat chakra, or how you express yourself, I call this the impressionable mind. This is more of like an etheric aspect of you, because it's like, have you ever heard, I don't know if this is gonna sound kind of scary, but I've had my guides speak to me as if they were in the room. Only at times where it was when it was necessary. It's not like random, you know, like a ghost or like something scary. But at times where I needed to hear something, I would hear straight up answers. You know, like as if it came from another person's mouth. like as if another person was there with me. And not that it scared me, because it was like I was resonating to get a response from the universe, you know, but that ability to make vibration, or that ability to speak, or to somehow create an impression so then you can pick up on that vibration, understand it, that's an etheric aspect. It's the same as when your presence can be felt, you know, because your etheric body has all that vital energy that is your signature in a sense. Your impressionable mind, or your throat area, your throat chakra, does that same thing. It creates that vibration to who you are, or what you're presenting, or what impression you have. So that's why it's considered etheric, an etheric aspect of you. It's your non-physical, physical aspect, you know? So when it comes to the third eye, that's more of an emotional aspect, because you only rationalize things that in a sense make sense to you, but it has to resonate with you in a sense. Like, you have to be able to understand it at like, you have to be able to connect with it, and connection equals emotion. So that's why when you rationalize things, your rational mind, or your third eye, is an emotional aspect of you. And then your crown just kind of like governs all that, you know, everything that's happening within and outside of you is how you present yourself, or how you're seen, or, you know, all of that. So going back to the ego, because that's what I wanted to talk about. When it comes to your ego, the 3 dimensions that it bases itself off of is your inner conscious and your conscious mind, as well as its own reflection. And if you think of the things that you're conscious of, the things that you're consciously aware of is your body, your environment, and you know, impulses. Maybe not really impulses. Sometimes you don't even know what triggered you, right? That's a subconscious thing. But when you are aware of something like that dog barking, I could hear that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm conscious of that dog barking. And when it comes to my self-esteem, or the things that I feel inside, or maybe if I'm hungry, if I'm not hungry, if I need something and have a desire within me to fulfill, or maybe I want to do something to, I guess, like, help myself physically, these are all aspects that the ego mind tends to focus on delivering those satisfying, I guess, results to those aspects of you. But sometimes it can be too fixated on the inner child. And the inner child is just a reflection of all that. Like, oh, that time where I couldn't satisfy this craving, or that time I didn't get this person, or that time where this job rejected me, or or my friends rejected me. Just all those soft spots that you have. The inner child, or the I wish I had another name for this soft spot, but it's like a mind, you know, but it's not a real mind. It's so interesting how we are built, like, psychologically, and it doesn't make sense how disconnected we've been from this, and it's really sad, to be honest, to see a lot of people not understand that, you know, you have to stop being in a loop. You have to somehow climb out of the loop, or realize that you've been in a loop, and be willing to take responsibility for it. Sometimes as people, like, we have to survive in a certain way, and we can't take responsibility for that, because the thing that we have to do is like an obligation. It's like something that that's been, like, put on us, like a curse, and then we have to, like, deal with it, and we have to be in this loop. You know, when you've built up a lot of obligations to things, or maybe other people put those obligations on you, it's really hard to open up that heart space. And if you were to open up your heart space, you know, it would be a dark night of the soul. You know what I mean? The soul would realize so much, and it would be very harmful to its reality, or to how it's been living its reality. and I understand that. And then there are times where we have the full freedom to change this and we don't because of a fear, or just you're just being afraid of an energy blockage. And when it comes to energy blockages, an obligation can be an energy blockage depending on who or what put it upon you or put it into your space to make you believe that that's what you have to remain fixated on. But an energy blockage can look like anything that keeps you off of your spiritual evolution. You're supposed to be able to evolve. Like, we have all this space for a reason, but a spiritual block will keep you from doing that. And a spiritual block is usually like energy that becomes so dense that we can construct it as something almost. Like, there's so many different energy blockages. Like, I talk about emotional blockages, I talk about mental blockages. I'll just recap a little. So emotional blockages, emotional blockages and imbalances, because I've realized that when it comes to emotions and your mental mind states, these things, yes, they can be blocked. Like, you can be blocked from receiving or from getting to the next level of your mentality or your emotions, but also you can just be imbalanced. Like, you're using one more than the other. Like, you're using your logical mind over your emotions, or using your emotions more than your logic, which can look a totally different way. But when you're blocked, it's almost like your limits to think, you no longer can think of a logical way to deal with things. Or when it comes to your emotions, like, your emotional limits have been reached and you're just dry and cold now. You just are like numb almost. And it's these energies that keep us, I guess, energetically blocked or bound to a certain way of being. And as I made the example about the dam, that's what you're essentially doing with your emotions. Like, you're building a dam, like, and that's why you might say damn a lot. Or when it comes to your logical minds, like your ego, we tend to be stuck at our ego. So for mental blockages, it looks like you can't surpass your ego. It's almost like you can't see you can't see any other perspectives other than what makes sense to you, which can be very limited already. So you're just kind of, you're too fixated on the practical, or you're too fixated on what makes sense to you, and what makes sense to you isn't always like what makes sense. Anyways, so when it comes to spiritual blockages, it can be accumulation of that, or it can be accumulation of like the things that your family has imposed on you, like those mentalities or those mind states, or not even their mind states. It's like their morals, their moral systems, and the things that they believe are right when really it's not necessarily right. Those are also spiritual blockages. When you hold on to that, you become attached to that. You think that that should be your way of being as well. Spiritual blockages can go on for generations. This is when we have generational curses, but this is a spiritual block. Like, your spiritual path is being blocked because of something that's being passed on. It's almost like someone gave you the torch and they're like, all right, take the torch and give it to your kids. And it's just, you have to recognize that this torch needs to stop being passed on. Like, you have to be able to be that person in that line of spirits, or that line of, I guess, spirits just experiencing. You have to be that one light that decides that it's not going to keep that energy block anymore. And you have to see in your own life, like, why it really isn't working. You know, like, why is it not working for me to have this much fear? Or why is it not working to have such a survival mindset where I'm literally manipulating people to get what I want? And that's what the ego will do. It'll even go to extremes like manipulation, just to perceive its reality a certain way and to survive and to be able to gather resources for its comfort. It'll manipulate. And it doesn't sometimes doesn't even know it's doing this. Like you as a being, and you're in that space, sometimes you are just doing it because that's what you know. Like we have certain, I hate to compare it in this way, but we do have certain energy, I guess, parasites or energy vampires that maneuver like this. Like they don't know that they're draining energy from you. This is just their function. They just need to survive. This is just how they go through their experiences. And so when you're in your ego and you are logically trying to just survive without that connection or without that realization that that you're doing, I guess, more harm than good, or you're just serving yourself in a sense, then you're becoming like a parasite, like, or you're being vampire-ish. And it's good to recognize when you're being that way, so then you can stop spiritual karma. You know, you can stop. You have to stop getting when the getting is good, and you have to really think about like, what repercussions will this bring on me if I keep going with this mentality? Like, where is this mentality going to get me? Soon enough, like, people are going to get tired of you draining them, or soon enough people are going to distance themselves because they have to for the sake of their own survival. So you have to think of like, how can I balance the scales? How can I make it so then I'm not hurting anyone and I can still get what I need? And of course, this is going to involve you diving into that heart chakra, that fourth chakra that is the subconscious mind that a lot of us are afraid to dive into. And that would be up to free will and your individual spirit. So some people are able to transcend, and that's what transcending is about. And sometimes people want to act like they've transcended because it looks good and you can make a real reputation off of it. But whatever it is, I really hope it's bringing you true emotional fulfillment, because you can only have true emotional fulfillment when you trace yourself back to that heart space and you work on that aspect of you, and you stop trying to fulfill that inner child that can't be fulfilled anymore, and you look back at yourself and you look away from your reflection and you just sit with yourself and think, what is it about this inner child that I'm looking at that can't be fulfilled? What am I doing that isn't working? How can I get rid of these blockages or these energies that I feel like are not serving me, so that I can develop new mindsets or a new way of thinking? How can I strengthen that bridge between my heart and my mind, or minds, so that I can use them all equally? Because once you do that, you become more powerful than when you're just in your ego. Your ego thinks it can be powerful. You think you can be powerful in your ego space. And a lot of people become powerful in a very destructive way. So in a sense you can be, but you don't reach like peaceful empowerment. You just try to find power and control over something. So I hope this video was informative and I hope you liked it. I will see you in the next one.